Yeah, 1105 stuff. Let's go right into it. So, let's go talents first. What's changed? First of all, Echoing Reprimand is gone. It's now replaced by Supercharger. Supercharger basically does the same thing except no minigame, and it just empowers the next finisher after Shiv. So you press Shiv, you press your finisher like normal, it has extra combo points, done, dusted. That's it. That's all you do. No minigame, no nothing. Then the choice node is Echoing Reprimand versus Forced Induction. Forced Induction makes the bonus go from 2 additional combo points to 3. Echoing Reprimand means that after you consume a supercharged combo point, basically after you do a finisher after Shiv, your next Mutilate does extra damage. That's all it does. Power-wise, this is fine, but we'll get more into that later when I go over the Sims. Then we have the Subterfuge change, which is, Subterfuge, stealth. Instead of just being 3 or 6 seconds after stealth, it's now extended. So you're turning, for example, improved growth from 6 seconds to 12 if you have 2 points put in, right? So it's extending by 3, it's extending by 6. So that means improved growth go from 6 seconds to 12. Same with Carnage, going from 6 to 12. Master Assassin, going from 6 to 12 if you run it. And then that also means you have more time to trigger Ironwire, which is the main draw of Subterfuge to begin with, right? Ironwire has been nerfed to 5 seconds. However, because Improved Garrote can now be extended to 12 seconds, you now have 12 seconds to apply Ironwire. The problem with Subterfuge, eternally, however, is that it does no damage. It's simply no damage. And even though it sounds like getting 12 seconds of Improved Garrote or 12 seconds of Master Assassin or whatever, 12 seconds of Carnage, it's just not worth it. The easy comparison to make is that in Dragonflight we had 10 seconds worth of Carnage, and nobody really used the last half of it. Like, you would do 3 Garrotes, you do a Rupture, you do another Rupture, and then that'd be it, which is kind of the same thing that we do now. So, I don't know, it's about the same. There's no real reason to have a 12-second Carnage. Yeah, people will still run it because of utility. I still won't recommend it. I understand why people do it, but it's a big loss. So what can you do? The last thing, Master Assassin, nerfed 6 seconds now. Instead of 30% 3, it's 20% for 5, 25% for 6 seconds. And then we have the big rework, Twist the Knife. This is the complicated one. Mamma mia, we get Iron Fur. If you don't know what Iron Fur is, I will explain to you why this is weird. So, normal Twist the Knife from this patch, from 11.0, is just the Envenom duration increase. Now in 11.05, we get an overlap of 2 times. That looks something like this. So let me explain what's going on here. You Envenom, right? Let's say you Envenom. You have this green bar at the bottom, that's your Envenom buff. Then you get 2 additional seconds from Twist the Knife, right? So this bottom bar is the entire Envenom buff duration for this first Envenom. Then you mutilate, Envenom. You get another bar, right? And this overlap here, where both bars overlap, you get double the Envenom buff. Now, these stacks are asynchronous, so you can't pandemic them. The bottom bar times out independently of the top bar, right? All the buffs are independent timers. But the good part is that we now have double Envenom buff, especially during cooldowns, so it ramps Kingsbane faster, for example. The other thing that it does is it doubles Rapid Injection, so it goes from 10% to 20%. Dashing Scoundrel goes from 5% crit to 10% crit. All of these are great stuff. And Twist the Knife in single target is roughly equal to about a 40% buff to Dashing Scoundrel, just because of the buff uptime, right? Just because of the change of the buff uptime. So this is giving a lot of energy now, and we'll see this being used in single target especially. Did I miss anything? No. All right. So let's go into the numbers and the Sims and the stuff that we have. Now, before I go into this, I want to preface that there is a lot still janky. There's many things, and Twist the Knife especially doesn't have great support because asynchronous stacks don't have great support in Sims, which means I can't test some theories that I have until those options get added. So take this all with a grain of salt. Everything is still in flux. We can still change, but this is the current idea, right? Okay, cool. So this is the single target. We did go up. This is a buff overall. And you'll see that we are using 2 lethality, a supercharger, and we're using Twist the Knife. We also are dropping Vicious Venoms, and we're taking Improved Garrote and Master Assassin. Now, it does take Sanguine Blades. I don't recommend Sanguine Blades, personally, and I will show you in a second why. But it's a pretty standard setup. Like, if you're familiar with 11.0, this should be familiar to you as well. Except that there's no Vicious Venoms here, right? We don't want to slow down the spec now that we have more maximum Envenom uptime. So we want to go higher. We want to go even higher. We want to go more Envenoms, more all the time. Uptime good, etc., etc. So slowing down the spec in general, bad idea. Sanguine Blades, also a bad idea, but the sim tries to avoid it, which is weird. So keep that in mind. It's strange, and we have a little bit of a comparison as to why I don't recommend Sanguine Blades. Internal bleeding. Point is 0.2% behind in single target. It is legitimately 2000 DPS. And the good part about this is you don't have to try and be under 50% for Sanguine Blades. Sanguine Blades says that your bleeds do additional damage above 50%, but eat energy in order to do so, right? And the counterintuitive thing is that you want to be under 50% energy in order to get more Envenoms out. So Sanguine Blades is really only a tool during your cooldowns, because during your cooldowns, right, with Deathmark, you're going to be having a lot of extra energy coming up, especially from dashing and the doubled poisons and the doubled bleeds. Deathmark is a huge source of energy. So during Deathmark, Sanguine Blades kind of keeps up, and that's where most of its value is coming from, but in normal rotation, you want to be under 50% to get more Envenoms out. It's weird to play around, in my opinion, and for 0.2%, it's forgettable, in my opinion. I would rather just go with Internal Bleeding, have this just be a passive on my Rupture, free damage. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to think. I don't need to have weird back-of-my-head thoughts about what if I have to move out and I'm above 50% energy. It just waste of time for me. I'm going to recommend Internal Bleeding. It won't make a difference otherwise. You'll see in the rest of these comparisons, for example, Vicious Venoms slows the spec down, big loss. Or you'll see that there's other things that drop, like dashing, right? Also a loss. It also wants to drop Internal Bleeding because bleeds don't do damage. And that brings me to my other point. If bleeds don't do damage, and we're taking something like this, why are we taking Improved Garrote? And the answer is that Improved Garrote kind of sucks. I'm going to be honest. Improved Garrote in single target, real bad. But we have to get Improved Garrote to get Master Assassin, and Master Assassin is real good. So that's the trade-off. Now, there's been a lot of conversations, especially in the Rogue Discord, about Improved Garrote, Master Assassin, and which one do we play around. Right now, it looks, based on Sims, that you will want to play around Master Assassin, but only in, like, a roundabout way. So, in your opener, when you vanish during your death mark, you're reapplying Improved Garrote, right? And that naturally lines up Master Assassin to the end of your cooldowns, so you don't have to think about that. After that, it's basically better to cast everything on cooldown than it is to hold for Improved Garrote. So what ends up happening is you deathmark, let's say at 0, right? On pull. You deathmark on pull. Then when your Garrote runs out or gets close or in pandemic, you vanish to refresh it. The Master Assassin lasts to the end of your cooldowns because it's 6 seconds. So last 6 seconds is Master Assassin from your vanish. 2 minutes later, your death mark comes up. You just slam it. Like, you just slam it, and whenever vanish comes up in your death mark, you're going to want to vanish into a Garrote again. And then that again makes Master Assassin just line up. So you're always vanishing technically for Master Assassin, but you're still casting the improved Garrote from it. Now, depending on fight timings, if you're already holding your cooldowns, you will want to get your improved Garrote up beforehand or earlier. But for Sims, the thing is that it loses casts holding for 10, 12 seconds or whatever. So it's an oddity, right? It's a bit of an oddity. You'll have to use a little bit of brain. They're both fine. They're both very similar. In general, on cooldown, play around Master Assassin. You'll be good. You'll be fine. And that's basically about all that I have talent-wise in single target. We'll cover some twist the knife stuff in a bit, but you'll see, there's a lot of weird stuff, but this streamlines a lot of our talents. You'll see that we very quickly drop off. So instead of having 40 builds like we do now, we have maybe 2, which is whatever. And it should simplify a lot of the decision making. The last thing I want to cover in single target, though, which might be a little bit upsetting for people. This number is higher, and it's Fatebound. Why? Well, the reason why is because there is a bug with lethality in the game. It's been around for a little bit, but basically Kingsbane double dips lethality's bonus. Because Fatebound's already taking lethality in cold blood in order to get inevitable end, what ends up happening is that Kingsbane's bigger. Heads flips make Kingsbane bigger. The tier buff made Kingsbane bigger because tier now affects Kingsbane. Kingsbane's 10% stronger. Master Assassin makes Kingsbane stronger, especially now that it's 6 seconds. And so you've kind of had this storm coming together of a bunch of changes that don't directly impact Fatebound, but a bunch of changes that indirectly put Fatebound into this perfect storm, right? And this is about 1% better right now. I will say, yet again, disclaimer, Twist the Knife doesn't have support yet in Sims. I don't have options to test some theories, and that could swing things up or down depending on how we want to play around it. Remember that Darkest Night, for example, is a big Envenom. If we start playing around this as an effect with Twist the Knife, Rapid Injection, etc., you might see Deathstalker pull ahead again. But this just goes to show Fatebound isn't that far behind. You can play it. What are the downsides? The defensive is far worse. It's more RNG. It's kind of it. Fatebound is really, really, really RNG. I guess you also don't have singular focus. So on something like Ovanax, singular focus is huge. Does a lot of boss damage. But in single target, like on Sikran, for example, right? Or even Kaiveza, Fatebound's looking pretty strong. So keep that in mind. If you see Fatebound, it's not too weird. And with that, M plus time. Oh boy, M plus time. So again, with M plus, there are multiple ways to sim. I've simmed both Dungeon Slice and Dungeon Routes, so I've emulated, so to speak, a big Mists key, Mists of Tir na Scythe, because I feel like that's the least the most impervious to changes in like pulls and stuff, because you have the maze, so you're kind of forced to do maze pulls. So I think that that's kind of the most consistent option. If you disagree, whatever, man. Dungeon sims are so cooked. It's whatever. But this is Dungeon Slice. You'll see this sort of cleave build, but it doesn't take arterial precision. It takes twist the knife. And the reason why you would do this is for the single target, which I think I have here. So this is a 3-minute boss fight. Don't mind these. The buffs are like whatever. But you'll see that hybrid builds are a couple percent behind. This is pure boss damage. This is not prio damage. This is not AoE single target, right? This is boss single target. And cleave is a little bit ahead, right? Especially if you drop arterial precision in order to get twist the knife, which I think is pretty cool. But in general, right, hybrid builds still keeping up. And then you have without a trace. This is what? Without a trace builds really suck in single target. Really bad in single target. Is what it is. Subterfuge sucks. That being said, right, the rest of this looks pretty normal. You still have Iron Wire, you still have Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest. All of this is the same. Supercharger, we have 1 point, but we're taking 2 points of lethality. It's more overall damage, more Kingsbane, like I discussed in the single target part. Master Assassin, it's hard to get a point for Master Assassin, is the thing. So the question is, where would this point come from? Well, the first option would be one of these two, right? You'd either take Twist the Knife or Amp Poison. If you take Twist the Knife, you lose the single target, though. It's not as good, and you'd have to start like vanishing on Kingsbanes. So because you're using Vanish for the crit, you're not using it for the bleeds anymore. So I think that that's just strictly a downgrade in practice. You want to save your Vanish to spread bleeds again, right? And so having another use for Vanish just kind of dilutes your ability to spread bleeds. I would, in general, not recommend Master Assassin. During these 6 seconds, you're going to be spreading bleeds through Carnage anyways. There is, I guess, kind of a reason if you're running Subterfuge and then Iron Wire, but then you're still casting Garrotes for Iron Wire, and so the crit isn't doing much for you. It's just very strange in M+, because it's a clashing idea, right? If you're casting bleeds, you're not doing any big hits that would want you to crit. And if you're critting, you don't want to spread bleeds, but if you're not spreading bleeds, you're not getting Iron Wire. So they're just kind of, like, working against each other in AoE. So don't run Master Assassin, just stick with the standard stuff. However, hybrid build, still good, sims higher, technically. Standard stuff. This is completely normal, completely standard. We're just taking lethality and 1 point of supercharger. Everything else, completely stock standard. And we have a little bit of comparison here. So here we have a cleave build. Oh, I forgot to tell you, by the way. This is 3 minutes patchwork. This isn't, like, this part isn't the mists. This is the mists. We'll get to that. Anyways, this is stock standard cleave. You'll see that hybrid build right under it in Dungeon Slice, right? All the normal stuff. You'll see here, dropping Sudden Demise for Twist the Knife. Little bit of a loss, but this could be more single target, right? So you have all these options too. You can play around with it as you'd like. Sims generally try to drop either Arterial Precision or they drop Sudden Demise. Those are the 2 points that Sims really like to drop. It also likes to drop the entire left side here, all the way to Systemic Failure, and then put it somewhere else. So you'll see like a lot of left side stuff, like this entire vertical column goes to this vertical column. You'll see that it like tries to take Tiny Toxic sometimes, and then drop these 3 points, and then put the points somewhere else. In general, this is only a single target situation. This is a lot of Envenom damage, a lot of Kingsbane damage, Execute damage. But Blindside in general will help with bosses, but it's not good in AoE, right? So that's kind of your trade-off. Now, with all of that said and done, it also tries to drop Kingsbane, which is crazy to me. Like, it thinks this is okay. But Dungeon Slice is weird. The packs don't live that long. So for that, 14 Mists of Tyrannus Scythe. Now, remember that these numbers are out of combat numbers. So this is not details numbers. Details only reports numbers that are in combat. And this is still only a hypothetical. But you'll see hybrid everywhere. Hybrid real big. And the reason for that is purely because I think there is a priority. Yeah. Wait for it to load. When you have Twist the Knife, your prio goes way up, but hybrid additionally in general is higher on the prio scale because of Scent of Blood. Right? Scent of Blood, I have notifications turned on. Hello, person, if you're seeing this. Scent of Blood makes prio damage and AoE go crazy high, right? 20% agility, then being pumped back into your Envenoms onto a single target when you're doing like caustic spatter stuff is a lot of extra prio damage. And this is why you'll generally also see that like bleed builds that don't take the center at all are still higher prio damage and AoE. It's simply because Scent of Blood. Like, that is it. Scent of Blood goes bananas for prio damage. So, having something like Scent of Blood is really good if you have, like, casters in a pack or, like, a big mob, big mini-boss that you need to kill. Grim Batal, for example, there's the Overseers or the Dragons, right? Those are all over the place. You have the Molten Giants after the first boss. You have the Lava Bender guys. You have the Enforcers. There's a lot of prio targets in that pack. All right, entire pack. You have the Corruptors at the end even. Basically, every single pack in Grim Batal has a priority target. And so something like Scent of Blood for that, really, really good. That's just how the math adds up. So, I'm still going to recommend Hybrid. Cleave is playable. Sims are just Sims, right? So Cleave, even though it looks bad here, looks real good in Dungeon Slice. So it's definitely playable, but you have to recognize the pitfall. The pitfall being you get a little bit more boss damage, but you lose prio. You lose Sudden Demise. You lose the quick openers from Bone Spike. So all of that kind of swings back and forth depending on what you like. Other than that, what else has changed? Stats are still the same. We're still crit mastery in Mythic Plus. We're still every stat in single target. Haste is still good. None of our embellishments changed. None of our enchants changed. Gems are still all the same. Hero talents are still all the same. Fatebound and M Plus still sucks because hello, singular focus, and also bait and switch at higher key levels is just way too good. Having a big defensive like this is really important in higher keys, especially after you get to like 12, 13. So a lot of people have been playing Deathstalker for the added prio damage, as well as for the added defensive layer, right? All that's fine and dandy. Play Twist the Knife if you want, or don't. More options are good. There is a little bit of a meta discussion going on, though, about Twist the Knife and what exactly the point is. So, for a long time, Envenom uptime is just really, really high. And you'll see here, if I open this up, with Twist the Knife, Envenom uptime is crazy high. We're averaging 1.56 stacks. So that means we have a 57% uptime on 2 stacks, which is really, really high. Like, that's really high. 157% uptime on Envenom is just crazy work. But the problem is that this is the solution that has to happen because Blizzard hasn't found a way to keep Envenom under 100%, right? Like, things like Rapid Injection were added to specifically give gameplay around maintaining the Envenom buff. And even with that, Envenom was like 95% uptime, right? Like 90, 95. It's really hard to keep Envenom uptime down because the spec tries its best to keep it up. That's why we're dropping Vicious Venoms now, so that we have more Envenoms. So I see what the point is in that regard, with like going up to 200% max instead of 100% max. But it doesn't fix the inherent problem and the inherent design of like Envenom uptime just being something to play around, but also not play around. It's very strange. I don't have a solution. I'm gonna be honest, I don't have a better solution. But I mean, something's gotta give. Right now, especially with the whole Twist the Knife Iron Fur thing, because it removes Pandemic, because it's an asynchronous stack, removing Pandemic means that if you're clipping your Envenoms for rapid injection at 2 stacks, you just lose uptime. Like, you just straight up lose uptime. Because you want to clip with rapid injection at 2 stacks to get 20%, but there's no Pandemic to fall back on, so you just lose whatever time you clip at, which makes it really awkward because you want to clip at like 0.01 seconds left instead of 1 second left, because you don't want to lose 1 second of uptime. It's so strange. It's so strange. But what can you do? Rotation-wise, talk about some stuff. I didn't want to do it earlier. I just wanted to talk about the talents. There are some changes rotationally that are minor, and those are still being looked at. I'm still testing stuff every day to try and figure stuff out. Some people have also suggested some good ideas. The first of which is, do we try to avoid T? The answer is yes and no. So Sims will try to avoid T. I have this set right now at just like 90 energy, so you always want to try and be above 90-ish energy unless you're in cooldowns. But if you just full slam and you ignore the T auto proc, it's like 0.2%. It's super irrelevant. So keep that in mind. If you haven't played without Vicious Venoms, you will want to Fan of Knives and single target, just as a reminder. The other change is that Thistle T, because the spec is speeding up due to no Vicious Venoms and the dashing change with Twist the Knife, the spec is getting real fast. So like if I scroll up here, it's like 54 actions per minute, right? That's much faster than we are now. Right now we're at like 46 or 47. And so what ends up happening is more Envenoms, more energy, which means the energy from Thistletea is not as needed anymore. And so Thistletea ends up just being during Shiv regardless of energy. Which means, yes, you can macro Thistletea to Shiv. You have my blessing. If you super want to, you can macro it. It's not ideal. You're still losing, I think, like 0.2 to just slam it. Might be 0.2 or 0.3. And that's just simply because of some timing stuff that happens, where it still happens to overcap a little bit, less or more. But in general, if you just macro it to Shiv, it'll be okay. It'll be fine. That'll especially help for AoE, because T and AoE is good stuff. Aside from that, we don't play around new Supercharger. You would still want to play around it if you have Darkest Night, for example, because Supercharger does work on Darkest Night and the marks. So for the marks, you just finish on 5 like normal. Okay, guess the music's gone. But if you have if you have Darkest Night, you want to finish on maximum, right? 5 and 2 from Supercharger is maximum. So in the case that lines up, you can finish on 5. No big deal. You can also go to 7, and then it would be a 9 combo points. That also works. Combo points are linear, so you're not losing anything. So if you just want to completely ignore Supercharger and just finish on 5 and then finish on 7 for Darkest Night, go for it. Makes no difference. You were getting the same amount of damage regardless. It's all efficient. Go nuts. I think that's all. If there's anything more, I'll answer it in the comments. There is also a review article coming out on Wowhead soon for like all of the other specs, like, oh, what's changed, right? Like the overview stuff. There's also guides that are updated. They will be going live. Honestly, if you're EU and you see this video, they might already be live, but it should be like Monday-ish, middle of the day Monday, for North America. And those should have all the changes and all the talent builds. I did have an updated, I'll show you a secret. Secret. New builds. I'm going to show you from here. A new build for Avanax because of the changes. Avanax uses Twist the Knife, which is great stuff. This is also something you would use on Council. So I also have it on Silken Court, right? 2-target, also a banger. Twist the Knife, AoE, good stuff for single target. So that's going to be real good. Anyways, I hope that covers it all. Have a good one. Bye.